Uh, Good evening, folks in India, and good afternoon to the audience from America. Welcome to all of you. We have a very exciting session now on the aerospace industry, defense and aerospace. It is indeed a huge honor for me to introduce my friend, philosopher, and guide, Mr. Ramachandran, first of all, who will be moderating this session. To give you a little background, Mr. Ramachandran has 40 years of experience. He's an electronics graduate from MIT and also done his management studies from the IFT School of International Management and the Faculty of Management Studies, Delhi University. He has varied interests and is involved very closely with the alumni associations of MIT, the Board of Governors of MIT, CII, ELSINA, and of course the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce. He's a recipient of many awards, including the Outstanding Alumnus Award from IIFT, from Anna University. He's also been honored as the Outstanding Rotary President of the Year and a Lifetime Achievement Award in Electronics from Electronics for You magazine and the Electronics Maker magazine. So there's a lot of pedigree and experience which Mr. Ramachandran comes from. And off to you, sir, to take us through the session.
Thanks a lot, Shamil, for your kind words. And it's really a great pleasure to be in this session, which is going to talk about aerospace and defense and civil aviation. This is an area of great interest presently, and it's this industries, though in private sector this was small, this is going to explode into a very major industry in future. And so it's, we have three excellent speakers who will be able to provide the insight into how this industry is going to take shape in this country. Two of them are people who are in the midst of the thick of policy making, so they have the complete insight into this industry. And they are going to talk about it. And Avik from Boeing will talk about how this industry is going to be very accessible and useful for MSMEs. So welcome to this. Welcome to the three speakers. This area of A&D and civil aviation is going through a lot of churning. While the government has been pushing for Atmanirbharta, the global geopolitics that has now made it clear that it's an immediate need. It's not something where we plan for the future. The requirements are also increasing with the plans for CapEx increasing, and that opens up a huge market for domestic players. There are a lot of new platform requirements for all the services in terms of new aircrafts, helicopters, ships, submarines, tanks, troop carriers, guns, small arms, etc. These may represent more than $250 billion over the next decade. There are also major requirements for offsets, exports, maintenance of military hardware, software, etc. Space segment also looks to be a major market for the domestic companies. The government has come out with some really very nice policy initiatives for private sector to get into space, and there is a huge potential awaits this industry. The government is continuously coming up with simplification of procedures, monetary support, technology support through DRDO, etc. They've also reserved many key equipment for manufacturing in India. Mr. Sanjay Jaju will be talking about the potential government support, various schemes like IDEX, startup supports, etc. And maybe PLI is on cards for the area of defense and civil aviation. While the production is increasing, the need for technology and materials, etc., will open up a big market and opportunity for Indo-US cooperation, and big market for US companies. So I'm sure Indo-US relationship in this area will be expanding. Looking at civil aviation, the market is set to boom. We're looking at adding 700 to 800 aircraft over the next decade. There'll also be requirements for helicopters. Then the drones are going to be a massive market soon, both in civil and defense applications. The number of airports are supposed to go up to almost 200 within the next decade. The infra requirements will again be a major market. Mr. Dubey will be talking about how this market is shaping up and how the government is going to be an enabler for this expansion of this market. And of course, how the government is working on easing the way for this sector. Mr. Avik Bhattacharya will be talking about the potential for MSMEs to participate in this increasing markets in this sector. Our first speaker will be Mr. Dubey, and let me quickly introduce him before he starts his comments. Mr. Amber Dubey, he is the Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Civil Aviation, Government of India. Mr. Dubey is a Joint Secretary, and he's an alumnus of IIT Mumbai and IIM Ahmedabad, and has a professional experience of over 28 years. He was one of the 9 professionals selected in 2019 by the Government of India to join as Joint Secretaries on a lateral entry basis. At Ministry of Civil Aviation, Mr. Dubey is looking after drones, aerospace manufacturing, MRO, flying schools, IT and skill development. He's also the acting Vice Chancellor of the Rajiv Gandhi National Aviation University, Amethi. Earlier, Mr. Dubey was India Head of Aerospace and Defense at Global Consultancy, KPMG. While at KPMG, Mr. Dubey worked closely with Ministry of Civil Aviation in drafting the Vision 2040 National Civil Aviation Policy and the policy framework for regional connectivity schemes. He had assisted Ministry of Civil Aviation in drafting the 12th 5-year plan for aviation. He had also advised various airports, airlines, cargo, MRO, and ground services companies in India and abroad. It's a fantastic thing because normally consultants provide consultancy and then they move away. But here is a consultant who not only provided the vision and the consultancy, but he's also taken the responsibility of implementing those recommendations. Kudos to you, sir. I think you have taken that very difficult responsibility. And, I don't know whether but the industry calls you fondly as Mr. Drone, because the kind of work you have done to simplify the rules and, the kind of push you're given for that industry. Thank you very much. In 2012, Mr. Dubey was honored for valuable contribution to Indian aviation, the then aviation minister. May I present Mr. Dubey to you? Mr. Dubey.
Yeah, Mika Nandri, sir, and thank you so much for this kind introduction. My humble request would be that if you can see, I'm just about to reach home. These are the Parliament days, so it's long nights, and some of my team members are still in the ministry. I'm about to reach home maybe in the next 5 or 10 minutes, and I'll get disconnected. I'm on the road. There are frequent disconnections. So my suggestion would be, if you permit, if you can bring in Avik in or Mr. Jaju if he's joined, and then I'll come back maybe another 5-10 minutes once I reach home, because there could be again a disconnection there.
Fine, sir. Good. So we'll do that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Has Mr. Jaju joined, Suchata?
Not yet, sir. I'm just trying to reach his number.
So can we now request Avik? Is the connection okay?
Can you hear me? I can hear you faintly, but
great.
How good is my audio coming across to you?
Yeah, now we can hear you. We had a problem.
Okay, all right.
Great.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly introduce you, then you can make your presentation.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Avik Bhattacharya, Director, Global Strategy and Market Development, Boeing Commercial Airplanes. Avik leads global strategy and market developments for Boeing Commercial Airplanes based out of Seattle. He leads a team responsible for developing global strategy, strategic partnerships, industrial participation strategies, and other business collaboration and market development opportunities across the world. Previously, Avik led a team within International Strategy Organization in Seattle. And prior to that, he was Boeing Commercial Airplanes Director of Business Development and Strategy in Boeing's office in New Delhi. In that role, he was responsible for developing and growing Boeing's in-country industrial collaboration with Indian entities. So he knows the Indian industry, the markets, and the Indian government setup. And of course, now he is in the headquarters, so he knows the way Boeing operates. So it's going to be very interesting to listen to Avik in terms of, he knows both sides. He'll be able to kind of provide us insight into this. Prior to joining Boeing, Avik worked in strategy, consulting, supporting assignments in mergers and acquisitions, private equity with clients like Goldman Sachs and Blackstone. He got to work in multiple business areas ranging from infrastructure to chemicals. Avik speaks multiple Indian languages and makes two in Mandarin and French. Wow, real linguist. Avik holds a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and two master's degrees in business administration and international studies from IIM Calcutta and the University of Washington, respectively. Avik.
Thank you, Mr. Ramachandran, for that very warm introduction. Thank you very much. And it's good to be
before
here.
you start,
I see a lot of senior colleagues
Yeah.
and dear friends here. So thank you again for inviting me to the panel. I will focus my my remarks to the small and medium scale enterprises because I think we are all aware of the work that is happening with the larger companies, but I particularly want to focus on the small and medium scale enterprises. And I'll speak partly from a Boeing perspective, but I also take a much larger perspective of what is happening in the aviation and aerospace manufacturing sector in India and what more needs to happen to support small and mid-sized enterprises, right? So obviously, the kind of companies that we see now emerging in the small to mid kind of scale for specifically aviation aerospace is a lot more heartening and encouraging compared to what the situation was when I first started in Boeing, which was about 12 years back, right? In the last about 5 to 6 years, we have seen the emergence of lots of new companies ranging from Russell, Texas, to Sim Tools, to Acres, etc., etc. And then we therefore now have a much more broader base of small to mid-sized enterprises in India focusing on this sector. And that is encouraging because this sector specifically requires a huge amount of investments in the first 5 to 10 years. The ROI is very less. And the quality requirements and the investment requirements are stringent and very high. So it requires a special breed of small to middle scale enterprises to actually stay in this segment. Now, in terms of what larger companies like Boeing and Airbus can do and are doing is this. The work to identifying these companies starts very early. So while we're already working with about, let's say, 10 to 15 SMEs right now, we are also in the process of evaluating a larger set of companies that we could potentially start working with in another, 2 to 3 years. So that's step one. The second step is we get companies involved in what is called bid workshops, because one of the major problems SMEs face, not just in India but the whole world over, is that they are not very well aware of how to break into the ecosystem, the supply chain of larger companies, right? And that requires understanding of how the bid process works, what kind of bid ranges they should put in for their bids, and what are the kind of key criteria through which larger companies place work at smaller companies. So that's the second part. The third part is, once this process is underway, how do you actually make sure that the company, after it wins the bid, is actually able to deliver on cost, quality, and schedule? Those are three things that are paramount in the aerospace industry: cost, quality, and schedule. So therefore, we have to deploy people to work with these companies so that they are able to, inculcate the processes that are required on two fronts. One is the production quality and production management front, and the second one is on the quality processes. And both of these streams are very, very critical, right? The fourth thing that we do is that we work very closely with the management and the middle management of these companies to make sure that the workforce is very well trained. Now, SMEs typically are a poaching ground for larger companies. So you have, let's say, ITI graduates that go into these companies on the shop floor, they pick up skills, they learn new things. And then, after the company has invested a lot of time and effort, in 2 to 3 years' time, they get poached by the larger companies. So how do we make sure that companies have a ready pipeline of talent that is there and the workflow does not get disrupted? And the fifth process there is that, once a company's production has stabilized, let's say 5-year term, then how do we make sure that the company is able to move to a larger league so that it is able to support higher volume production? So those are the steps involved in how SMEs are supported, right? Now, having said all that, I think what is emerging in India is that we are seeing that the complexity of work that is happening is evolving, right? Like I said, when I first started about 10 to 12 years back, most of the work was less complex. It was simple assembly or simple machining, right? Now we have reached a stage where we are able to do complex machining, we are able to do complex assemblies, and we've evolved from focusing only on metallics manufacturing to working with composites and titanium, which I think is very encouraging, because the world of aviation manufacturing is moving away from aluminum-based metals manufacturing, as has been the tradition in the past. In terms of evolving trends, one is, of course, the evolution from, let's say, aluminum to titanium to composites, and increasingly to thermoplastics. And these are things that SMEs also need to be aware of, stay abreast of, because the technology and the production processes in the aviation segment are evolving very rapidly. In the next 10 years, maybe even sooner, I can tell you that we are going to be moving very drastically to materials that are lighter, emit less emission, and essentially move away from a metals manufacturing background towards composites and thermoplastics. Right? The second thing that I would like to point out, and this is specific to the Indo-US partnership, is that there is a huge requirement and demand in the US from tier 2 and 3 companies, through which they can collaborate with partners in lower cost countries such as India, so that they are able to lower the cost of their offering to companies such as ourselves, which is Boeing. Now India is attractive for a couple of reasons. First, the emerging capabilities in India are being well noticed across the world. Secondly, because of the increasingly close US-India partnership at the government level, Indian companies now have access to much higher levels of technology, which was not the case till even 5 years back, right? And therefore, US-based companies are able to share drawings, are able to share technical processes, technical know-how, which they were restricted from doing till even 5 to 7 years back, right? Therefore, India is in this very small group of countries which has access to those capabilities. And the advantage India has is that on top of these capabilities, India has a low-cost advantage, which it should look to benefit from. The other point that I'll quickly make, and then I'll stop here, is that traditionally in the aviation and aerospace sector, we have looked only at manufacturing, which is all right. But what I do want to point out is that there are other areas that are opening up, services. And services is important because as the aviation aerospace fleet grows in India, which is close to about 700 aircraft already, and we expect it to reach about 2,200 aircraft or so in the next about 15 years, there will be a huge requirement for services to support this fleet, right? And services entails everything from cabin furnishings to spare parts, right? And there is a huge kind of market which is available for SMEs in India to venture into. I would also include things like ground support equipment, ground handling equipment, cabin furnishings like, let's say, seat covers, headrest covers, carpets, galley equipment. So these are things which are absolutely made for SMEs, and I think SMEs can benefit hugely from beginning to focus on these additional areas rather than just have a singular kind of focus on metals manufacturing, which has hitherto been the case, right? Mr. Ramachandran, I want to stop here for at least this point in time. I can come back later and share some more remarks, but I do want to give the opportunity to the other panelists to share their thoughts.
Thank you. And if anyone would like to raise a question, please put it on the Q&A box, and it can be directed to any speaker. And end of the session, we will get those questions answered.
Yeah, sorry, just to interrupt here, one moment. I could see Mr. Sanjay George have joined in the attendee link. Request him to come through the panelist speaker link.
Yes. Okay.
So you may continue by the time.
Sure. Thank you. Mr. Dubey?
Yeah, thank you so much, and sorry for that interruption. So I'll speak primarily about drones because that's the area which takes up almost 60-70% of my time. And there are other smaller things which I look after, including flying training and other skill development and IT initiatives that we'll maybe chat later if the time permits. On the drone side, I think this is a very exciting time, and this is one technology which has captured the imagination of everyone. It's everybody's favorite, flavor of the day, and rightly so. It has a technology which is almost like in the internet of the 70s and 80s, and maybe the cell phones of the late 90s and early 2000s. It's going to be everywhere. There's no part of our lives which will not be touched. Of course, it has huge benefits on law and order, on defense side, on agriculture side, infrastructure, surveillance, project management, asset management. I can just go on and on. Suffice it to say that just like internet and cell phones, there's no sector, I would call it more closer to internet, that there's no sector on planet Earth which will not be touched by drones. That's the power of this drone. And as we've seen in this ongoing saga in Eastern Europe and various other theaters of war in Central Asia, drones have shown their power on the lethality side, and how asymmetric it is, and how these old tanks and old fighter jets and many of those conventional weapons, I think it'll be very difficult for them to handle a swarm of maybe 10,000 loitering munitions coming and going after them. So drones is what is going to rewrite history, and that's why the Indian government is very, very conscious that we need to move very, very quickly on this one. So if you notice, last March, we came up with some drone rules based on the environment at that time, because rules are and laws are written in the context of the society that we live in. In the 2019, 2020, we see lots of terror incidents and that Saudi Aramco strike and a lot of airports being shut down in Europe because of the drone scare. So our March policy did weigh a little heavy on the national security and safety side. So putting a lot of restrictions on citizens, and you need this clearance and that clearance, etc., etc. But I think we got a lot of backlash from the academia and the industry, and within the government also. And we had the humbleness to say, yes, we did make a mistake. And within, I think, 5 months, in August last year, we came up with far more liberalized drone rules, in which some 25 forms, 20 out of 25 forms were thrown out. Lots of licenses, approvals, permissions, multiple layers of approval, all that was brutally cleaned out. And this was came, though Mr. Ramchandra was very kind to call me Mr. Drew on this. If you have to really, first of all, I mean, in government, we are supposed to be nameless, faceless, tireless workers or soldiers without uniform. But the real Mr. Drone, if you have to call someone, would be the Prime Minister himself, because it required PMO's direct intervention, the Honorable PM's direct intervention to cut out some of the naysayers and some of the restrictions, and some for the right reasons. Maybe some of the restrictions that were being suggested by some of our security agencies, maybe they were well-intentioned and, of course, in the national interest. But somewhere you have to always draw a line, and that line can only be drawn by a superior authority, which is the Prime Minister's office, which lords over all the other ministries which come under it. So in August, we came up with those liberalized rules. As I said, 20 out of 25 forms were thrown out. Lots of licenses and permits were thrown out. There were 72 types of fees, because every form will have 2 or 3 types of fees. And then based on the size, there are 5 categories of drones from 250 grams right up to 300 kilos. So on and so forth. So 72 types of fees, we brought it down to just 4. And also they were like in hundreds of dollars and stuff. And they were just brought down to about $1.5 to $2. And now there are only 4 types of fees. And 3 out of 4 are actually 100 rupees, which is going by the way the rupee is depreciating. Maybe that's just about $1.2. And one fees is 1,000 rupees, which is whatever, 14 or maybe 12 or 13 odd dollars for 10 years. So effectively, again, same to $1.2 per annum. It's almost like free. So all that happened. And so, I mean, I don't want to waste time on the policy. It's very, very simplified. And within, I think, 3 weeks, we got the cabinet nod for the production linked incentive, which again was a big support given to us by the government and by the cabinet. Because if you notice, most of the other production linked incentives schemes, I mean, they have taken 8, 9, 10 months, because these are big numbers and lots of approvals required and various layers of challenge rounds happen. And it takes months and months, say 8, 10 months. Many, even after 12 or 14 months, are still trying to get the nod. We got it in 3 weeks flat. So that, see, history is, I mean, I'll only speak of measurable events, recorded events which are in the public domain. And that should give that confidence that this is for real. So a cabinet doesn't just allow something, this is like, it's a cash incentive scheme, which puts money back in the hands of the producers, the manufacturers. And the scheme is also, I mean, it's put 120 crores, which is effectively not a huge number. It's like whatever, 15 odd $1 million. But don't forget that the total size of the manufacturing industry in India, the drone manufacturing industry in India, was half of that. So 60 crores, and that's whatever, it's about 7 odd million. And from 7 odd million, we're going to put 15 odd million in the hands of these people, okay, over a period of 3 years. So it's like 200% of the current industrial base. Of course, the base is a very tiny one, and I'm sure it will grow 10x, 20x, or maybe even 100x. Okay, so this is just seed money, which is government putting its money where the mouth is, and putting money, cash, back in the hands of the manufacturers. So this happened in September itself. In October, we came with the UTM framework. In September, we also created the airspace map. We've released the airspace map publicly. I mean, for almost 1.5 years, 2 years, there was this big debate. How can we put our red zones in the public domain, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, cutting a long story short, of course, again, there was a lot of opposition, a lot of coordination, because you have to deal with the police forces of 28 states and some 7, 8 odd union territories, and then so many armed forces, services, CAPFs and their intelligence units, so on and so forth, almost 45 plus entities You have to work with them and give them the login ID and password and get them to map their 4,000 plus red zones on the Indian map and then put it in the public domain. Of course, it's a low resolution map, so it doesn't tell you much beyond a point. But at least for the nice guys who are flying the drone, they get to know, okay, this is a no-go area and stay out of it. And I'm very happy to report that in September, when we released earlier, there were green zones were just about 10 to 15%. It went up to almost 90%. So from 20%, it went up to 90%. Of course, again, that's a matter of another maybe 2-hour session, how we somehow managed to do that and convince some of the people who had lots of negative thoughts about that. So that again opened up 90% of the airspace in India is now green zone, and there up to 400 feet. Most of the drones typically fly at 50, 100 or 200 feet for regular operations. We have freed up 400 feet, which is the class G airspace as we call it. So 400 feet opened up. You don't need any permission from anyone or log in anywhere or to take anybody's permission or inform any local police station or something. It's all gone. That used to be the norm earlier. This was September, and then October we came with the UTM framework, and I'm just jumping steps. And in January we also made all the 5 forms were made online on 26 January, which is a big day for us, almost like the 4th of July. So this is our Republic Day, and all the 5 forms were in a record time of just about 4 or 5 months. They were made online. We also released the drone certification. Now, if you have to certify drones, because if you to certify them as airworthy before you start manufacturing them in mass manufacturing. So the drone certification scheme also was launched on 26th of January. On 29th of January, most people saw, a very unique spectacle where you saw 1,000 drones doing a swarm drone display at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, which is the reddest of the red zone. It's I'll repeat, reddest of the red zone. You can't fly anywhere in Delhi anyways. With so many airports and military establishments and so on and so forth, it's almost impossible. And here, right next to the president's house and right next to the prime minister's office, we had the 1,000 drone show. And the bigger surprise was for some 11 minutes that the drone show was, okay, the president and the prime minister for the first time probably in Indian history were kept in absolute darkness. They sat in absolute darkness. The earlier plan was that they'll move out and then the drone show will start. But somewhere, I think somebody at the top decided that no, we will sit there right at Vijay Chowk, which is the venue, and watch the thing in front of us with the naked eyes, rather than go back to the president house or the prime minister's house and then see it on TV later. So, that was unprecedented, unthinkable, unbelievable. That for 11 minutes, the most, most protected people in India, the VVIPs, the very, very important people, were all sitting, the entire cabinet and the service chiefs and the president and the prime minister sitting in absolute pitch darkness. I don't know how many heart attacks their close bodyguards or the special protection group would have, which is called our secret service, would have faced, but history was created that day. And in February, we came up with the drone import policy. That a lot of debate again had happened. Any import policy always creates huge amounts of brutal conversations on both sides of the divide. And finally, we've decided that we will ban, and I'm repeating, we'll ban all import of all drones effectively immediately on 9th of February. On 11th of February, we came up with yet another notification in which we again abolished the drone pilot license. So earlier it was that you had to go to some DGCA, which is our FAA or FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, our version of FAA. And you had to finish a training at the DGCA authorized drone school and then go to DGCA. Of course, it was all online through the online process, but there was still this one step where you had to send all your documents and upload the documents to DGCA, and then DGCA will issue you a drone pilot license. And after a lot of debate and discussion and deliberations, we finally decided we are going to abolish that. So now just a simple 5-day training at any DGCA authorized drone school is good enough to fly. The drone pilot certificate will be issued online by the authorized drone school, and that is a good enough. It's almost like a license to operate, not license to kill, but license to operate. So I've just given a very quick. I've jumped several steps, but just given a flavor of what all has happened in the last 6 months, just about just about 5 days back, on 10th of March, we have also launched the PLI scheme, the Production Linked Incentive Scheme, wherein people can just go to our website and just fill up a very simple form. It's been brought down from several pages to just a one-page application, where you can just go in there and upload the auditor's certificate and upload the certificate from the CEO or the head of the organization appointing its authorized signatory, and then we'll deal with the authorized signatory. And based on this, we will calculate the eligibility and make up a list of all those people who are entitled to be paid the production-linked incentive. And thereafter, when the year gets over, our year gets over on 31st March instead of 31st December. And then after that, once they file their GST returns, which is the goods and service tax returns, and based on the returns, they can file a claim for the incentive. And we'll, after scrutiny, maybe by June or July, we should be rolling out the first checks or first pieces of cake to these. So I'll stop here. I think the idea was to just give you a broad flavor of the government has been almost on a policy overdrive over the last 6 months. Of course, it's based on effort of many people, and based on effort over last several 2 or 3 years. This policy doesn't just happen overnight. But now that the fruits are coming out, it's based on each thing leading to another thing. And now it's one. I would say India is right now one of the freest countries in terms of drone operations. 90% is opened up to 400 feet. And anyone who manufactures here will be entitled to a nice cash incentive coming with a lot of gratitude from the Prime Minister himself. Over to you, Mr. Ramachandra.
Thank you very much. It's very educative in terms of how you were able to do it within a very short time. And there were lots of companies, even I knew them, they're quite worried about what would happen to them in terms of how they can survive with all these rules. But they're all very, very happy now, and quite a lot of, I see, confidence amongst these, especially startups. They all are quite benefited. Thank you very much. So, if audience, if you want to ask any questions, please put it on the Q&A box. I have a question for Sudhir. In terms of our civil aviation aircraft, the requirements are going to be fairly large. Say, we're talking about additional 700, 800 plus aircraft over the next 10 years. Is one of the two large manufacturers, are they showing any interest to manufacture planes in India?
That I think is best answered by my good friend Avik. He's right there, and he gave a very, very diplomatic answer, I'm sure. And you ask the French, they'll also give a very equally diplomatic answer. But we are after them. We are chatting with them. We are telling them that you milled us enough, and it's now time for you to do some big bang stuff here. Every time you ask them, they'll give you some fancy number, and I'm sure I would rather leave it to my good friend Sanjay Jaju to be a little more brutal. But if I have a fight with my neighbor, nobody is going to come in. They'll watch from the sidelines. They'll probably sell me another weapon, and then also sell a weapon to my neighbor. And then whosoever wins it will be sold more weapons, because the dead neighbor may again come back. So I'm sorry for being very, very straightforward, because I am told Americans love straightforwardness. And so yes, we are a little unhappy with the way the big two, Boeing and Airbus, and this is generally the chatter that it's not my area, so don't treat this as this is a very nice informal conversations amongst friends. And anyway, I don't. In that introduction you said about aircraft manufacturing, that was for a short while, because there was some change of personnel and somebody retired, and there were, for a short period I was given the charge, but then. I mean, I myself excuse myself, because this drone thing anyway was going through some very, very tough things over the last 1 year. So it was only for a short period that I'm having the additional charge. Maybe somebody gave you my old profile. So my profile is far lower now as compared to earlier. But this is generally the chatter that I've been hearing over the last 10, 15 years. A lot of good, nice English speeches are given, but not much is actually being transferred to India. And we shouldn't blame the French or the Americans for this. It's our weakness, our problem. It's our problem. We have to sort it. We have to develop our own IP. Nobody's going to give it on a platter, definitely not defense work. And if they give it to us, we're going to beat them anyways in the next 5 or 10 years. So why would they give us anything on a platter? What will be given will be very, very small stuff, which there is a clear cost arbitrage by doing it in India. And most of it is driven by offsets. Offsets is anyway failed. Most of the offset deals are anyway in dispute. So it's not been a very, very healthy so-called collaboration. But again, the risk of repetition, I think the Ukraine thing has anyway told us. you got to fight your own battles. And if India has this dream of being a superpower, America is already there. If we have that dream, which we have been telling ourselves for the last so many years, we have to develop our own IP, our own weapons. We have to bring all these Aviks back. They've done a great job for Uncle Sam. We have to somehow find a way to entice them back. He's already made it to, he was also joining us as a lateral, but I don't know what Uncle Sam did behind the scenes. So he sent his wife over. His wife has joined as a lateral entrant in the Ministry of Law. So thank God for Hemanti, his wife, who's going to serve the Indian government. For some reason, which I don't know, Avik has decided to stay put. I think I've said more than my brief. It's not even my area to talk about geopolitics and sensitive international Indo-American relationship issues. But you just got me going there because Mr. Jaju didn't join, and I hope late night people are getting bored. Nobody's asking questions, so I thought everybody's anyway had a nice Taib Sadam and gone to sleep. So especially after listening to a bureaucrat. So I thought I'll spice it up a little. I hope I've given you your money's worth. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, Mr. Jaju.
Yes, good evening and good morning.
The Minister of Defense, the Government of India, looks after the policies for bringing in investments and growth in defense and aerospace sectors to advance the Make in India resolve. He has also been instrumental in setting up Defense Innovation Organization for creating a collaborative platform for startups to meet defense requirements. And, I must say that I said that Ms. Dubey is Mr. Drone. Actually, Mr. Jaju is the Atmanirbharta man for Defense Ministry. He has really spearheaded this Atmanirbharta with such a force that there's so many new things have happened. So you have the IDEX, you have startups, and you have recently, there are 200 and odd items are banned for imports. Now 18 items have been earmarked for domestic development and manufacture. Within 1 year, so many things have happened. Sir, I have been in the defense business for last 25 years. Now, last 2-3 years, what has happened has really kind of compensated for what did not happen over the last 20 odd years. We had to struggle every step to deal with defense, and it was completely opaque. But today it's completely transparent. People like you are willing to talk to the industry at any time, and even the uniformed people are willing to talk to the industry at any time. It's a phenomenal change for positive, and I'm sure that with this change, the industry will really grow and fulfill the requirement of Atmanirbharta in India. And as Ms. Dubey said, what has happened now in between Russia and it's something which is now become absolutely essential for us to manufacture almost everything in India. And thank you very much for being a great enabler of this. And I think I would like to really let you speak from now on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ramachandran. And indeed, I think you have taken words out of my mouth. This is one of the most interesting times when it comes to defense production in our country. And I'm very happy that the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce has, in your 2-day conclave, kept defense and aerospace as one of the important verticals. And I think this goes to show the importance of this particular sector. And believe me, we in the Department of Defense Production are very enthused with the growth that we have achieved over these years. And I'm absolutely confident that going forward, defense and aerospace sector would actually be one of the most important growth multipliers when it comes to the economic aspects, but at the same time, it will be a very important strategic driver for our country. And my apologies for not being able to join, because I was given a link which led me somewhere else. So it took some technical uh, handling for myself, and then I got a fresh link, and then I joined. And when I joined, I heard Amber, my dear friend, talking about certain strategic imperatives, and I think the current situation very clearly tells us that gone are the days when somebody else is going to fight a war for you. It's you and you alone who will have to fight. And the best foreign policy is, I think, if two words which have to describe the foreign policy of any country, it's self-interest. And it's this that actually should now drive us towards having self-reliance when it comes to defense. I keep saying this, and I've said this many times, that I think it's probably the most apt way to say, and right now, that actually the strength of a country in terms of its military is not determined by what you keep in your inventory buying from wherever you get it, but it's actually determined by the force of the industry which is behind you. Because there will be always the sets of equipment which will lie without use because you will not get the right spare at the right time. There will be some denials, there will be some embargoes, and all this will remain part of your showcase, and you will never get to use it. Neither will it be of any use in terms of a deterrent. At the same time, will not be used in terms of any defense that you intend to do. And that's why this government has been laying a huge emphasis on creating an Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense. And the idea is that we got to create an industry which can back our military when time comes. And not just back our military, but also take care of the needs of our friendly foreign countries when situation demands. And when we say that, because we are talking to the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, we're not talking about protectionism. When we say Atmanirbhar Bharat, I can say with confidence that we're not talking about building walls around our country and not allow any foreign player to come into our country. That's not the objective. In fact, everybody is most welcome. As long as you do make in India, as long as you manufacture in India, we are ready to buy from you. As long as you manufacture in India, we are ready to provide you the most well-laid level playing field. As long as you manufacture in India, will give you all the opportunities for you to not just make in India for India, but make in India for the rest of the world. And when I say that, it is backed by some of the most important policy measures that have been taken over the last few years. You mentioned some of them. It would be appropriate to the audience that you have to know that if I have to list out the steps that have been taken to create this ecosystem, on top of this list would lie the ease of doing defense business. I mean, look at the number of licenses that have been given for defense to the private sector. We had some 200 licenses in 2014, and today we are in 2022. So the number stands at about 570 licenses cumulatively. So I think we started allowing private sector in 2001. 14 years, 200 licenses, 7 years, you have what, 370 licenses. So that's the scale at which these licenses have been growing. And when the licenses grow, this goes to show that the roadblocks which were there, the entry barriers which were there to get into the defense sector are coming down. Coming to the foreign direct investment, I think we started it in 2001 again. To some limited extent, now you have almost 100% available for foreign player to invest in defense. 74% is actually the automatic route. From 2001 till 2014, we received some paltry 1,500 crores foreign direct investment in defense. And these last 7 years, this number has grown by 3 times. Still, it's not to our expectations. We still expect the foreign OEMs, the foreign players to come to India, invest in India, make use of the advantages that India offers in terms of land, labor, capital, market, and a huge improvement in the logistics, and a very stable political and social regime that we have. Coming back to the accent being given to what we call it as the Buy Indian IDDM, the Indian Design, Developed and Manufactured Products. And going forward, I think the broad impression is that we will not be importing anything. We'll be expecting our entrepreneurs and innovators to design and develop products and platforms within our country. And we'll also be expecting the global OEMs to come and make use of the facilities that are being offered or the infrastructure that is being offered in our country to produce for us. We offer one of the biggest markets in terms of defense and aerospace, both civilian as well as the military. And we expect them to come and invest in India, manufacture in India for India and for the rest of the world. Some more facts and figures. You would have recently heard in the budget announcements that 68% of the total procurement that we do in defense now has been earmarked for domestic procurement. It could be global OEMs doing it in India, it could be Indian companies doing it in India, but the bottom line is that they have to do it in India. And it's almost a flip of a coin, if I may use that word. Few years back, the ratio was 70-30 on the other side. The ratio is 30-70 on this side. You would also have heard in the budget announcements this year that now we are saying that 25% of defense R&D would be through industry-led design and development efforts. And again, the idea here is that we want to allow the industry to design and develop systems. We have various procedures available in our defense acquisition procedure. And the idea is we want to give them the assurance that we are going to buy it, provided you develop a particular platform or a system within our country. Defense being a monopoly, it becomes very important. Few days back, we have also come up with a list of 18 platforms that have been offered for industry-led design and development. It includes development of a light tank. Who would have thought of it that without involvement of any research, defense research development organization will now be expecting the industry to design and develop some of these critical platforms. These platforms also include on the aero side, we're talking in terms of a multi-role helicopter. So there are a lot of platforms being offered now, and this actually comes from a position and from a view and perception that we have of the industry, that now our industry is in a position to design and develop such platforms. It's come of age in a way. And there are a whole lot of procedures in terms of coming up with a positive indigenization list that we have. We have 209 items which have now been put out. And an embargo has been placed on the military to buy it from outside India beyond the stipulated date. So again, it gives a clear signal to the domestic industry and those who come and set up manufacturing within the country that from a particular date, such items are not going to be procured from sources that are not domestic. Then you have the export regime being liberalized. When an OEM comes and sets up manufacturing within the country, is also looking for a global market. There were a lot of barriers which were there to while the export authorizations were given, defense being a restricted sector, you require authorizations when you export. Now, India has become a responsible exporting nation. We are part of the multilateral arrangements. We are part of the Wassenaar arrangement. We are again part of Australia group. We are part of a host of such conventions. And as a responsible defense exporting nation, we have also created protocols within our country to provide streamlined and online authorizations. And again, it's exemplified by the fact that in 2018, our total defense exports are around 1,500 crores, and hopefully we'll have the record defense exports of about 13,000 crores this year. It's almost an increase of 8 times. All this has happened because now we believe in the strength of our industry and we want to provide them. We want to have trust in them. And we know that the products that go out of India are not going to get into wrong hands, because we have put sufficient safeguards and protocols in our system to ensure that defense exports from India move in a responsible manner, but at the same time provide complete ease to the business when it comes to doing businesses. Another important point that you actually mentioned, and it's very important to understand that, as our Honorable Raksha Mantri keeps saying this on multiple occasions, I mean, gone are the days when you couldn't even enter the South Block. I mean, the entire sector was kind of in a mystique environment. Everything is shrouded in secrecy, and nobody can even get inside. You don't even know what the needs of the industry are and what the needs of the military are. There was no meeting of mind happening. But now it's a complete open door. I think we in the department interact with the industry as nothing before. And I'm not even sure when either department has interactions of the kind we have. Recently, when we did the budget webinar, it was attended by close to 5,000 industry partners from all over the country and all over the world. So it's almost a situation in which we have a dynamic engagement happening with the industry. In fact, today when I'm part of this deliberations, I'm just coming back from the office, and I still consider this to be an important occasion. The primary reason is that the job in our ministry now, or at least in our department now, is to handhold the industry, listen to them, understand their concerns, and do what it takes to come up with policy measures that can lower the entry barriers and create a level playing field. And when it comes to level playing field, we're not just saying level playing field in terms of the public and the private sector. We're also saying level playing field for the domestic vis-a-vis the foreign OEMs, because there was this feeling in the domestic industry that they are being discriminated against, and we are trying to remove all those discriminations so that there's a clear level playing field. There's no overarching bias in favor of a particular set of industry. The bias is for doing things which have Make in India, if I may use that. And also now we've also understood that the strength of the startup ecosystem in our country, and that's where programs like IDEX, which we had launched 4 years back, have been bringing us very rich dividends. We have 5 rounds of Defense India Startup Challenges launched, and there are the entire range of platforms, products, subsystems, which are now being manufactured and which are now being developed and now gradually would be manufactured by these startups. And next week, you would hear that our Defense Acquisition Council, the highest procurement body, is going to be clearing proposals of procurement coming in from the startups that have designed and developed products as part of the IDEX program. Similar initiatives are in place now in which industry-led design and development is being given the primacy. We are also mindful of the fact that the next gen warfare or defense has to have a balance between both the kinetic and the non-kinetic aspects of warfare. India being a leader in software with a very fast-growing electronics industry, can leverage that to create market leadership in the kinetic segments. That's what is the understanding. And in this aspect, we're also looking at all the future domains involving around autonomous systems, green technologies, cyber security and cyber warfare, use of artificial intelligence, use of drones and counter drones technologies. And the entire segment of which encompasses the kinetic and the non-kinetic segments are being looked at. And I think in all these segments, we have been requesting the industry to come and invest in India. We've been saying that we will be their friends in the department. We'll handhold them to the extent possible. Will not come in their way to the maximum extent possible. And the whole approach would be to remove all the barriers of trade, barriers of doing business. And I think that's how India right now presents a huge opportunity for those who would like to invest in the defense and the aerospace sector. So friends, just from my side, if you have any further questions, I'm more happy to take those questions. I'm very happy that we have a huge engagement with India and US. When it comes to our exports, US, even in defense, is our leading partner. Close to 30 to 40% of our total defense exports is to US. And this goes to show that many of our companies have actually become part of the global supply chains. Most of the OEMs have joint ventures in India. Most of the US OEMs also have joint ventures in India. We have various platforms that are being produced within our country. And with opportunities coming in terms of design and development, I'm pretty confident that India and US will collaborate in development of not just meeting the current requirement, but in developing the platform that could meet the requirements of the future. So good luck to the chamber for doing this India-US Trade Connect. And I look forward to welcoming the investments in the defense and aerospace segment into India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I mean, you've covered whatever simplifications been done, and the ease of business is very, very important for the industry. Thanks a lot. I'm sure that would have given our delegates a lot of confidence. Thank you very much. Sujata, are there any specific questions, or do we have time?
Yeah, so we are already running late. So any last closing remarks from either of the speakers, Avik, or anything else to be added?
Okay. Avik, 2 minutes closing.
Thank you. I'll just respond to some of the things that Amber mentioned. While they are valid, I'll just point out a couple of things. One is a lot of the aircraft manufacturing chain is really based on the traditional methods of high volume manufacturing. And the reason I say that is, at its peak before COVID, Boeing was manufacturing about 75 aircraft just on the commercial side every month. And if you take an average of about 7 million parts per aircraft, that's about 500 million parts that were coming in to this area every month, right? And I mean, just extrapolating those numbers, so 75 into 12, about 900 aircraft being manufactured every year. So when there is an intent to place another, let's say, full-fledged manufacturing kind of ecosystem somewhere else, we need to have that much of demand from that market, right? India's current fleet is about 700 aircrafts. One could question whether it makes sense to set up a full-scale kind of facility like that. But I'll just share. I mean, those are the negatives of setting up a manufacturing kind of setup outside of the current footprint. The other side of this is that we have, in the last about 4 or 5 years, our thinking has evolved to focus more on lower rates of manufacturing. Right? So can we look at manufacturing at a site where we don't have to have 75 aircraft per month, but maybe 3, 4, 5 aircraft per month? Okay. It is in that domain that India has become very promising. Number one. Number two, and this is very important. Every country that has a good aircraft manufacturing base is essentially propelled by manufacturing for the domestic aircraft program. Right? No country, whether it's Japan or whether it's China or whether it's UK, etc., grew its aviation industry on the basis of manufacturing for a foreign OEM. And it is only now, with the focus on Tejas Mark 1, Mark 1A, Mark 2, AMCA, FGFA, that we have that ecosystem being created. I would think it would take a few more years for us to get there. But at least those elements are being put into place. So, I mean, I'm giving not a completely diplomatic answer, but I would think that when we have the next program, which I'm involved in, and that is the reason why I could not take up the appointment that was offered to me by the government of India. When we have that option come up in about 4 to 5 years, then India will be a very promising place for us to look at very, very seriously. Right? The last thing that I'll mention is that, look, I think, the way Indian airlines operate, manufacturing in India is not on their radar screens at all. So if you go and talk to any, of the Indian airlines, whether it's Indigo or it is SpiceJet or anyway, for them, the key priority is help us reduce our costs or help us have services in country, whether it's for maintenance, whether it's for training, etc., etc. For them, manufacturing is something which does not really impact them. And that is, one of the reasons why we have not had the kind of drive for manufacturing that we would have otherwise thought of. And the last point is, I think there is always this comparison that we tend to do with China. Now, given where I'm at, I'm very deeply aware of exactly what aviation companies have done in China. And I can just tell you that the kind of things that Boeing and Airbus do, that is nowhere close to a full-scale aviation kind of ecosystem in China. What are there are completion centers, interior modification centers, wing assembly centers, etc., which sound very incredible, but in terms of what they truly mean are way less than what it actually appears to the external world. Now, all that being said, I think the next about 4 to 5 years, as we get into the launch of a bunch of new programs in the civil aviation domain, I think India will be a very, very strong contender. There are very few countries that have the kind of resources that India brings to bear. One point that I'll make, before I end, is with both Mr. Jaju here and Mr. Dubey. Look, it is always helpful to have very high-level policies, and that provides the direction of the government, the strategy of the government, provides the intent. But it is equally important to have policies that are below that top-level policy that actually encourages industry. And I'll give you one idea right now, which would be very pertinent, which if the government of India can do, can actually impact aviation manufacturing in a very direct manner. And that is manufacturing of titanium. If you were to open up titanium manufacturing to the private sector now, then you will be amazed by the impact it has on aviation manufacturing in India. 80% of titanium for the commercial aviation industry comes out of Russia. That is all locked down. All these supplies of titanium will run out in about a year and a half to two. One of the largest sources of titanium ore is India, on the Kerala coast and the Andhra coast. But private sector companies, Indian private sector companies that are interested are not allowed to extract that ore and turn it into titanium sponge or titanium metal. Everything is controlled in Kerala by a company called Kerala Mines and Minerals Limited. In Andhra, mining is not even allowed. Just making those changes on titanium will completely transform manufacturing for India. Everything that used to happen or has happened in Russia for titanium can shift to India in the next 3 to 4 years if you make that changes. I'll stop with that.
Thanks, Avik. That's a very interesting point, and I'm sure Mr. Jaju would have noted that. Thank you very much. Mr. Dubey.
I'll keep it short because I'm almost been threatened by divorce by my wife because it's 11 p.m. here and they've eaten and they want to wrap up and clean the plates and put it all back in the cupboard. So I'll keep it very, very short. As I mentioned, I'll be repetitive that the Ukraine war has been an eye-opener. Before that, the Azerbaijan-Armenian war has been an eye-opener where centuries of occupation was ended in a 3-day war. And this was the first official surrender by one country to another. After the 1971 surrender of Pakistan to India in Dhaka. It was only made possible because of one special weapon called drones. So drones is the future. It's very asymmetric. Millions and billions worth of aircraft and tanks and all kinds of fancy metal can be taken out by a swarm drone or very, very cheap drones, which are very smart, which override the enemy defenses and can like a beehive being opened up in front of a lion. The lion will do disco dancing or break dance or whatever. And he could be the king of the jungle, but the lion or the elephant can be brought down by 10,000, a swarm of 10,000 bees. This is what we're going to produce. This Ukraine war has also reiterated by Mr. Jaju, is that nobody's going to come and help us in our fight with our friendly neighbors up north or west, or any other enemy, external or internal, as we call them. It's our fight. It's going to be our IP, our weapons, and we have to do exactly what the mighty Americans and the Europeans and the Israelis and the Japanese and the Chinese have done. Okay, pump more and more money into your own industry, pump money into R&D, pump money into the universities. Maybe 10, 20 or 30% of that will go waste. It's a good thing that this obsession with the PSUs and DPSUs and OFBs and DRDOs is all going away because we've killed that artificial divide, and Mr. Jaju deserves credit for being one of the big ones, one of the big wall smashers. So this artificial wall that we had created between public and private, me myself sitting wearing this nice sarkari dress, working on the government side, coming from a hardcore blue chip MNC firm, and now having access to some very, very secret files. Okay, is itself, and I'll retire in September. My contract runs out in September, and I'll be back to the private sector. And yet I have access to some very, very sensitive stuff. Okay, so this artificial divide of dividing Indian against Indian just because of the color of the check we get or which company we answer to is gone, which itself is revolutionary. And the government deserves kudos for that. So, cutting a long story short, we're going to do exactly what the mighty Americans or the Europeans and the other countries did: pump more money, okay, into research, R&D, IP decides the future. The weapons of 10, 20 or 30 years from now will be very different from the weapons of today, and that technology itself is a great leveler. So the one who masters the drone technology, some of the other technologies are anyway going to go waste. So our dependence on some of the Western companies or even Russia and some of the other suppliers is anyway going to go down. Okay, so that's it. Just pump money, believe in our own people, keep your doors and windows open. If some foreign collaborator comes and claims that he loves us and wants to do great and wants to see India great, fantastic. We'll welcome them with loving arms, but don't expect anyone. Thank you so much and a very good night.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. Jaju, your final comments?
I think I made my point, and I'm pretty confident now that we've the fastest growing civil aviation market in the world. Amber would agree, and of course, COVID had been a setback globally, but now we're back again, and even in terms of our military requirements, nobody can dispute that our requirements will continue to grow, and our complications will continue to grow. And if you have requirements and complications, the only friend that you have is self-belief. And I think that is what we are banking upon. And I think the important thing is always been to remove the barriers. And I'm very happy that we're trying to do that. All these artificial barriers between, as Amber mentioned, private, public, all this is gone. Designing has to be done by government scientists. The R&D money has to only go to a government department. I think all this is a pass. We don't discriminate. We have startups who are doing very strong, meaningful work at fraction of the cost and fraction of the time that arguably the big laboratories would have taken. And I think this is what our future is. This is an aspirational India, and we want those aspirations to be directed to solve the problems of the military. In fact, our Prime Minister, during the budget webinar that was held last month, made a very important point, and I'd like to quote him when he actually said that, when you develop your design and develop your own defense and offense platforms, you're actually bringing in a huge element of surprise for your adversary. Because otherwise you will find that the platform that you borrow and buy from a particular country are also being sold to your adversary. And effectively it nullifies whatever advantage you perceive in the acquisition of those platforms. So that surprise element can only come when you've developed and designed those platforms yourself. Other important point that was actually mentioned by our Prime Minister was, and when he exhorted and gave a clarion call to all our entrepreneurs in the country, that when you're getting into the defense business, there is a possibility that you may lose money. It's not a business which brings a lot of returns, but this is one business which can bring you a lot of satisfaction, that when you're doing this, you're serving the cause of the nation.
Sure.
And I think it's this call that it's possibly bringing the entrepreneurs to this segment. And we're pretty confident that the future is going to be very bright and rosy for them. And I also noted the suggestion that came in from titanium.
Yeah.
One of our companies, Mishra Dhatu Nigam, does a lot of titanium work. But we'll have to see how we make use of the opportunities that are now going to come our way.
Sure.
Given the current global geopolitical situation. And we'll try and see if we can convert some of these challenges into opportunities.
Thank you very much, sir.
Again, my thanks to the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, and a very good day to those in the US, and a good night to all those from India.
Thank you. And thanks a lot. Thanks all panelists. Thank you very much. I mean, I think it's a bit late for the speakers as well. Avik, of course, in a better situation than the rest of us, but thanks a lot. Thank you, Avik. Thank you very much, sirs, and bye. Good night. Bye. Thank you, Sujata.
Thank you, sir.